Well, welcome everybody. Welcome again to the CIB Presidential Seminar Series that we broadcast from Purdue University. As you know, we have been doing these seminars and panels for the last 5 or 6 semesters. And this semester, we have special themes. And for each of the special theme, we have a panel discussion. And that is leading up to the CIB World Building Congress 2025 that we are also hosting at Purdue University from May 19th through the 23rd. And the topics you will see are those that would get everybody excited, get the dialogue going as everybody gets ready to come for the World Building Congress, where the focus is the role of the built environment in supporting the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So with that intention, we have put together another excellent panel with a set of very distinguished colleagues from around the world. And they would be discussing the role of education for advancing the SDGs in the built environment. So let me give a quick introduction to our distinguished panelists. We have Professor Hal Knowles from University of Florida. He serves as the undergraduate coordinator for the Bachelor of Science in Sustainability and the Built Environment, and as an instructional assistant professor housed in the Department of Urban and Regional Planning at the University of Florida. Hal's background spans construction management, system ecology, and community development. He is interested in several interdisciplinary domains, including fostering resilience and cultivating adaptive capacity, exploring complexity and regime shifts within linked social ecological systems, improving human and community health, engendering social justice in community, integrating systems thinking, and several others. His research work has branched building to city scales and involves modeling the geospatial resource impacts of alternative urban land use scenarios, evaluating social equity in housing, transportation, and neighborhood communities, and deciphering energy use patterns. Our second panelist is Professor Fidelis Emuse. He was still recently working at the Central University of Technology, Free State in South Africa, and still holds a position in that school. And he's also the commission lead for people in construction. That's W123. Professor Amuse is a former head of the Department of Built Environment at the Central University of Technology, Free State in South Africa, as I mentioned. His areas are lean construction, health safety, sustainability, and so on. He has received over 25 awards and recognitions and supervised over 18 doctoral graduates. Dr. Amuse is also the editor of Value and Waste in Lean Construction, Lean Construction, Valuing People in Construction, and co-editor of Construction Health and Safety in Developing Countries. He's a research associate in construction management at Nelson Mandela University as well, and as an exchange scholar at the Construction Safety Research Alliance at the University of Colorado, Boulder. Dr. Emuse is an international coordinator of CIB 123, as I mentioned, which is People in Construction Working Commission. And as I mentioned earlier, he's also the editor-in-chief of the Proceedings of the Institution of Civil Engineers, Management, Procurement, and Law. Our third distinguished panelist is Professor Sepani Senaratne. She comes to us from Western Sydney University in Australia, where the current time is 2:30 a.m. So really thank you for that. She's also the lead for Task Group 124, which is Net Zero Carbon Building Design and Construction Practices. Professor Sepani Senaratne is joined construction management team in the School of Engineering, Design and Built Environment in Western Sydney University in December of 2012. She is the outgoing director of academic program for construction management, which is the largest construction management program in Australia. Sepani is actively working in the leadership team at the Research Center for Smart Modern Construction as the deputy director. Dr. Senaratne has diverse academic experience in quantity surveying, construction, and project management disciplines, She's an active researcher and has widely published in leading journals and conferences. Dr. Senaratne's main research contribution is on project and knowledge management. In parallel, she engages in industry-focused team research with renowned research on digital and sustainable construction. And uh, and currently, she leads some global research initiatives on net zero carbon and circular economy in construction and supervising 8 PhD students. Of course, I'm summarizing all the great things that all of our panelists have done in the interest of time. Our fourth panelist is attorney Jason Boffey. He comes to us from Mercer Thompson LLC in the US. So for over 25 years, Jason Boffey has worked with the construction industry, first after graduating from the University of Florida's Rinker School of Construction Management. Jason served as a manager of major construction projects. Subsequently, after graduating from the University of Florida's Levelland College of Law, Jason began his practice as a litigator in the construction industry with a focus on mega disputes. His construction skills and interest in the energy sector then led Jason to in-house positions, first with Siemens as senior counsel for EPC projects, and later with TEI Construction Services, a respected partner to power producers throughout United States. Jason's expertise lies within many aspects of the construction industry and within the energy sectors specifically. Jason has been responsible for the negotiation of the key documentation underlying many complex mega projects that have often included multi-million-dollar parties with the first-of-a-kind applications in the US market. Jason has an established reputation for perseverance, integrity, and practical applications of client counsel and advocacy. So with that said, with a rather brief introduction to our four distinguished panelists, let me hand it over to Professor Hal Knowles to get the discussion going. Hal, over to you.
Thank you so much, Mark. And I'd like to first express my gratitude to Mark and Paul and everyone at Purdue University College of Engineering and CIB for the opportunity to be here today. As sort of previously mentioned, my background is originally in construction management. I actually graduated in the same class with Jason Boffey, and so it's really a privilege to be here with him now. And after working for a couple of years in commercial construction management, I ultimately went on and got my graduate degrees in systems ecology. And so I tend to view myself more through the lens of sort of a systems ecologist, and I'm housed in planning, as Mark said. And so the program that I teach in is an interdisciplinary program here in our college. And our college has architecture and landscape architecture, interior design, planning, construction management, historic preservation, and our unit. And so our students in this program are interested in all of those different disciplines in the DCP suite, and they tend to view it through this this sort of generalist lens and dabbling in a lot of different domains. And so what I'm going to share with you today with regards to sort of our view through our program of sustainability and its role across all of those different professional disciplines, it will kind of interpenetrate each of them. So maybe one of the first places to start is to share with you the way that we actually define sustainability within our program. And I know everyone focuses on the Brundtland Commission definition, and it's a very meaningful definition, and it's helped, I think, usher forth this era of interest in sustainability. But we like to reinforce to our students that it's not a person, it's not a place, it's not a thing, it's not a destination, and it's certainly not a checklist, right? All the green building protocols are, again, incredibly helpful and really important tools as we make and manifest a more sustainable future. But we want our students to understand through this lens of sustainability education that it's really an experience-based, value-derived decision-making process, and it's focused on maintaining some social ecological system state that we value, and that's within some subjectively bounded spatial domain and span of time. And so the key here with experience-based and value-derived is that it's fusing objectivity, things that we can measure and sort of quantify in conventional scientific domains, and subjectivity and values. And it makes it very complex in that regard. And it's a process, and it's a process about trying to address issues. And we also help them to understand that it's a mix of dealing with tame problems, which have real solutions, and wicked problems, and I would say mostly dealing with wicked problems, which we might call dilemmas or paradoxes. And these are things that we can't solve. It's not a binary either or kind of approach. There's a multitude of pathways, and any one of them doesn't actually solve the issue. It just helps us to manage it, again, for some spatial boundary or span of time. So we like to say, kind of like climbing a mountain, the climber's handholds change, the conditions change, and each new position that they're in is a solution to where they just came from on the mountain, but it's the new challenge and the new problem to where they're going. And that's the essence of what we're focused on here. And so in our unit, we talk about the four threads in the tapestry of sustainability. And we don't refer to them in the notion of pillars. I know a lot of discussion is about the three pillars, and that's typically been planet, people, and profit. We feel as though there is a fourth aspect of this, and pillars seem fairly static, and tapestries kind of weather and wear it with use. They represent who we are, the colors, the textures in those in a tapestry speaks to the people who were weaving it. And so the culture aspect of this is also critical, and it's something that's constantly evolving and changing. And so we address it through the four P's, and we have planet and people, and we refer to the culture side as purpose. And then instead of saying profit, we like to focus on prosperity in the economic domain, which really starts to introduce the notion of equity and what's good for humans. And so we talk about this as kind of through Earth system science and this notion of a system of systems and all of these spheres, and the planet is obviously these foundational systems from which the biosphere emerged. And if we do our jobs well over time, we're not going to be focused just on the human side of the biosphere, the notion of people, but all living beings that we share this planet with. The purpose side talks about the ethnosphere, which is the sphere of culture, all ways of life across the diversity of our planet. And the noosphere is the sphere of thought, and that one is rapidly evolving now, especially with the World Wide Web, because we can now share those thoughts across the entire planet quite quickly. And then in the prosperity side, the technosphere certainly is the built environment itself and all of these products and the machines and the things that give us these creature comforts. And the cybersphere is kind of the inward version of that. It's kind of the inner space version of our technosphere. So we frame it in these ways, and we talk about this noosphere, this sphere of thought, as being kind of critical in sustainability because it's the sphere where we have knowledge and gather information and make decisions and share those things. So in the process of trying to understand this through the educational lens, we're trying to think about what potential competencies might be at play. And so one group, the Sustainability Education Accreditation Commission, has framed this through 8 domains that are critical for sustainability competencies. Systems thinking, which I'll talk a little bit about here momentarily. Futures thinking, which we can understand, with regards to trying to make decisions about where we might be heading. Playing out alternative future scenarios. If we choose a certain pathway, we may close down options for other pathways. And so the key is kind of making decisions and not getting an analysis paralysis, but keeping our optionality somewhat open. The values thinking certainly speaks to this idea that there is a subjectivity aspect to this and that there's going to be competing values, right? What might make sense for one corporation or business or community might not make sense for another place, another point in time. And so there's always going to be this kind of contentious back and forth with values. And I'm sure when Jason talks about the legal side of things, that some of that will come to bear when it comes to contention in the legal sense. Strategic thinking is a part of this. The intra and interpersonal side of things, right? We could, learning to be our best selves is a key part of being leaders in this. And then that interpersonal, intercultural communication and competencies are critical. And then ultimately, the way that we implement, these frameworks and these decisions to make better, to have better solutions or strategies for managing our paradoxes. So one of the things that we want to do, because we're an interdisciplinary program and we have to pay attention to the fact that we are training students that might end up moving more towards the planning side, or moving more towards the construction management side, or maybe moving more towards the building owner side. Some of them may even go into corporate sustainability. And so they're thinking about it through that organizational sustainability lens. So we try to suggest that we want to focus on first principles, thinking about the background capital resources, natural capital like energy, water, and the material resources that we use for our built environment, as well as the sort of human capital, social capital, cultural capital, financial capital, and that those things flow into sort of the foundational goods and services that enable actions of all living things. All living things need to eat and drink. They need to dwell and take shelter from the elements. They need to be able to move around in space, to procreate, to share resources, to communicate, and then they need to commune, which is kind of coming to grips with that intrapersonal way of knowing and relating to the world, and the interpersonal connections. And those things ultimately flow through the five sort of major phases in our economy: production, processing, distribution, consumption, and post-consumption. And they lead to a variety of system states or outcomes. And we kind of always frame these in kind of a polarity way, almost a yin and a yang, in the sense that it may be a double-edged sword. Things that are a solution for some stakeholder group may actually be problematic for another, right? And so opportunity in one domain, as we incentivize renewable energy infrastructure, may become a constraint to existing businesses that have a different model, right? And so it's balancing all of these things and thinking about how the choices through this kind of model of the system change and exchange these 9 planetary boundaries. And even though climate change is a very prominent one, it is not the only aspect in the ways that humans are the prime movers of change here on the Earth, what we refer to as the Anthropocene, or this epoch. And I know it's being debated as either an epoch or an event. We might be more like a meteor hitting the planet than an epoch itself, right? So we have to make these decisions about that. So thinking about this notion of the first principles and how we might try to make better decisions, we try to do it through frameworks like this DSRP theory, which is one theory in systems thinking, and it breaks it across distinctions, and it looks at the polarity between identity and other, me and you, my business, your business, internalizing, externalizing, aspects of the system and what we're accounting for. The system itself, thinking from parts to wholes, the relationships between all the different variables in the system, whether they're agents like humans or inanimate things, right? And that action reaction, the cause and effect, and then ultimately perspectives. The point, meaning sort of that vanishing point, that which is the limits of our knowledge, and the viewpoint, which is my vantage point, where I'm actually perceiving something from. So thinking about that a little bit, jumping forward, unpacking the distinctions and system side of things, we can take an example. One of my doctoral students is the Vice President of Environmental Affairs and Sustainability at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, and he was exploring the airport through digital twin technology to try to understand the risks that they face through a variety of systems drivers and potential change domains, and looking at it through the ecological, social, infrastructural, technological, and the like. Thinking about this notion of perspectives and thinking about point and view, in one of our courses, in our spatial thinking course, we talk to our students in very literal, objective ways about point perspectives, right? And you see the image on the top left there, and you can see that there's really 0-point perspective there. This is a photo of concrete, and there's not really something that draws your attention. There's no focal point, and you could really kind of be looking and focusing on anything. And then you've got the 1-point perspective, which draws your attention in one domain, 2-point, 3-point, multiple point, which is a panorama, where you start to realize that the camera has now taken the technology of multiple photographs of the person moving their camera in a panorama, introducing a multitude of perspectives and simultaneously representing them and scaling them into a single image. And at each of these new introductions of a new perspective, we actually have a richer understanding of the real world, and we miss less less things, right? That inattention blindness that we each have in our tunnel vision starts to be mitigated and reduced because we're bringing more perspectives to bear. And I think this is an important aspect of sustainability issues, is bringing more perspectives, whether we're talking about more cultural perspectives, whether we're talking about more businesses and their interests and their needs. And the like. And if we think about this and scale it into some of the modern technologies, we could think about technologies like photogrammetry, and we could think about all of the different points of view, all the different perspectives that the drone or a person with a camera might take, and then ultimately creating a richer model, a richer point cloud. And each of the points in that point cloud are the vanishing points, right? Each of the photograph sources is the vantage point, that's the view, and then the point cloud is the point. And the more points we have, the richer, more accurate representation we have of that building. And there's no limit to that, right? So at some point we have to stop and say, well, the information is accurate enough. The challenge here is that there is a problem of projection. Reality is more complex than we can understand and more complex than we can model and try to represent. So when we try to downscale a higher dimensional system, let's say downscale the three-dimensional sphere of our planet onto a two-dimensional map, the problem of projection tells us that something about that system gets lost and gets distorted in downscaling it. So when it comes to sustainability, there's always some degree of uncertainty, variables we don't understand, things that we still have to learn, right? And so the sort of the parable of the blind individuals in an elephant, each of them touching a different part and explaining what they see at the part level, and none of them have a complete picture to be able to know what it is they're actually touching. But bringing each of their perspectives together gives us a better chance of potentially seeing what's really there. And in my last slide, I'll close out by sort of suggesting the importance on that social cultural side of this notion of perspective and relationships and polarity thinking. And the image, there's a lot of text on there, so I'll try to quickly sort of summarize that. Figure one there, the top of those three images of the small a's in this H pattern is what a person that had full functional uh, two hemisphere function of their brain working, they would see that whole of the H and the parts of each of the A's. And a person that has damage to their right hemisphere, when that image was pulled away and they were asked to tell what they saw, would explain and show what you see there on the figure two, which is just a bunch of small parts, a bunch of A's. And the person that has damage to the left hemisphere of their brain would only see the general stick figure, very broad, very abstract outline of the H with none of the parts. And so the reality is that we are able to do these amazing things that we do because we have the function of both sides of our brain, both hemispheres, and they allow us to see the parts and the whole simultaneously. And so polarity thinking is both and thinking, and paradoxes, wicked problems, are only addressable with both and thinking. There's no either or to solve them, right? And so this idea, the last little metaphor here is, if you think of it like a crane that's doing demolition with a wrecking ball at the bottom, the longer that line that's holding the wrecking ball, and the further it's pulled from one side to the other, the more that its wrecking power is. And so when we're dealing with polarities, whether it's culturally, socially, environmentally, economically, the more that we can sort of rise to that higher station and minimize that swing and try to address it, from a both and position, the higher the likelihood that we're going to come up with more real representations and more adaptive solutions for that. So I'll kind of end it there. I'm happy to revisit some of these themes as we dig into the topics. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hal. Thanks for setting the stage up. And I'm sure there are a lot of interesting questions going to come your way towards the end of the seminar. So let's move on to Fidelis. The next 8 minutes are yours.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for this opportunity. Thank you so much, Mark, for having me again for the second time within 2 weeks. I appreciate your support and encouragement, and thank you to Podo as well and all colleagues on the panel this morning. I'll be talking from the perspective of people in construction that have the privilege of leading for close to 9 years, first as a task group and then a permanent working commission in the CIB. And also, I'll be talking from the cap I used to wear as head of department at the Central University of Technology, Free State, South Africa, and what we did. So my talk is anchored upon educating the construction workforce for sustainable development. And thanks a lot, Al, for setting the stage. I'm not going to repeat some of the things that you have said, but in my presentation, I will just highlight overview of SDGs in the built environment, why it's important for us to educate our workforce so that we can contribute to the achievement of sustainable development, and the relevance of lifelong learning. And you all agree with me, at least all the panelists and the graduate students that might be on the platform, that construction work, either at the strategic or operational level, affect a range of SDGs. So there's no need to debate that. That's why we're having this seminar series. If you look at SDG 1 to 2 to 3 and 4, you can see our contribution in it. Quality education is required for us to make our contribution in particular. And whatever we do must necessarily project decent work and economic growth, whatever we are building, whether in Australia or in South Africa or in the US. All right. What is workforce empowerment? I look at it from this angle of the fact that it is just improving skills, knowledge, and tools for us to improve productivity, which is a dilemma in the construction sector, and the well-being of people in construction as well. It is enabling the workforce, really, whether you are a construction manager, a project engineer, or an artisan, or an apprentice, to perform their tasks extremely well when they are motivated. And workers on site, and they trust the leadership, they are more creative. They have more ability to solve our problems. And the contractors, that are more important, because without them, we can't have our infrastructure and other things. They will have a better, stronger bottom line, regardless of the prevailing regulations that they may be operating under it. So there are 4 steps to empowering our workforce. We have to show them that their voice matters when they give us feedback, constructive feedback. We have to recognize them. We also have to, the core of what we are doing this morning, ensure we create opportunities for professional development and growth. And you can see Jason, I'm very happy. He started off as a CM, and it's an attorney, So he really branched off, and I'm very proud of his trajectory, what he has done. There are few people that have done that. Then, of course, we have the right culture, organizational culture in their environment. Then we can say we are empowering our workforce. So when it comes to this particular presentation today, I look at empowerment from the angle of education. I've mentioned that in the construction context, if we want to build sustainably, we want to contribute to sustainable construction, SDG 4, 8, 9, and 11 are relevant to us in the construction industry. And we just need to look at the targets for those SDGs for you to understand that they are very, very key to us as construction managers or project engineers. And once we are able to do that, we educate our people, then we have them, they are better motivated, we have higher productivity, we have them solving our problems on site and not waiting for the senior management to come in. We have them making decisions in a confident way, and we have reduced employee attrition, etc., etc. These are the advantages of workforce empowerment through our educational platform. Now, the next slide, I'll talk about education for sustainable development. And why I decided to use this, because we have done this in my university. We can help, especially people in built environment disciplines and engineering disciplines, expose them to a range of SDG issues and targets through project-based learning. We have done that, and we are currently also doing it in South Africa, and ensuring that they see that whatever we do has a global perspective and local impact, and the use of technology is relevant. Thank you, Al, for showing a digital twin. I know Professor Chime is very strong on it. We talked about it even in September. Now, there are multiple ways of educating and empowering the workforce. The first one that, of course, that we can always endear to our people in construction is apprenticeship. All right, in the US, you can see the National Center for Construction Education and Research is busy doing that, training 4-person superintendent and site safety guys on multiple ways of building green building and sustainable construction. And of course, I want to believe that almost everywhere, whether it's the UK or South Africa, the use of AI, it has come as a game changer. We find expression. Digital tool has been there for like 10 years now. The use of AI, we find expression in the training that is being undertaken. I wrote W089 via R, and it did not disappoint when it comes to the university nitty-gritty education, how we do it in our university. All right. On this particular slide, because of our time, I'll run through it. We presented this in 2015, and it's still relevant today, 2025. These are, and I think he addressed some of the questions that came through from the student yesterday, clusters of roles and skills that are required when we want to build sustainably or we want to promote sustainable construction. When we are conceiving, planning, designing, and advising on green construction and sustainable construction, we have to necessarily educate our students about energy efficiency, renewable energy, building code, etc., etc. We also have to encourage them in conducting research in that aspect. When it comes to on-site work, we have to also educate them, and I think in that aspect, apprenticeship will really have a strong role to play. These particular tables are adapted from the ILO report and presented in a paper 10 years ago. So this is what we did. A couple of years ago, 2018, we had Professor Lozano from University of Gavin in Sweden at CUT to help us to map out our contributions, the contribution of all our programs to sustainability using the 3 pillars, not the tapestry. And it came out with this diagram, the chart at the bottom. And we can see that on the economic front, what we were doing was touching finances. And on the environmental front, we were looking at resources in what we are teaching, either in engineering or management science and pollution as well. So when we were now developing this a response to one of the questions that were asked, developing our new qualification at CUT, we designed specific subject or courses that addresses sustainable construction. At the higher certificate, which is the entry level, you have construction and the environment. And if you are registered for undergraduate Bachelor of Construction program at the Central University of Technology today, either you are specializing in construction management, quantity surveying, or health and safety management, you will undertake urban development and sustainability as a subject. You will undertake urban development economics, and work integrated learning has several elements in terms of project base of sustainability. The same applies when you undertake the postgraduate diploma. But what is important for us as a university is a graduate attribute on sustainability. Meaning if you exit the program at CUT, whether from management side or engineering or built environment, you should be a bit exposed to the effect of what you do, your process and your work on the environment, or on the society, or on the economy. So that is very, very important to us. So there are challenges at country level, developing country, resistance to change and inadequate funding. I've exceeded my time by 2 minutes now, so I'm going to finish. Then developing country, limited access to tech training, high cost and inadequate policies. We are at the company level, we need to provide access, whether workers have access to programs that help them to develop their career, in implementation, whatever we train them, is it filtering to practice? Can we see changes after maybe giving them training on renewable energy? Can we see changes in how they do what they have to do on site? How well is data used to inform the training we provide for them, workforce development? And if they have access to the technology we are exposing them to, maybe DT, etc., etc. So we will need the triple S to find a solution. Government, companies, and industry players must come together for us to have solution. For the graduate student, once more, I'm posing these questions that you can deliberate upon in your discussion forums. How does workforce training impact productivity in sustainable construction? What policies best support lifelong learning for construction workers? How can digital education tools accelerate workforce development or empowerment? This you deliberate amongst yourself. So in closing, workforce empowerment is key to SD, especially when it comes to construction. An investment in education for sustainable development enhances productivity, safety, and project outcomes. Every one of us, when we work together, we are stronger. Thank you very much. That is the end of my presentation, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. No, thank you very much. I think we'll catch up. But thanks for raising important issues about how to train people in construction, not only at the university level, but also at the workforce level, and in terms of enhancing the understanding of sustainable development issues. So with that said, let me move on to our third panelist, Professor Sinarate. Sepani, floor is yours for the next 8 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope you can see the slides now. Yeah. So hello everyone. So I'm Sepani Senaratne, an associate professor from Western Sydney University in Australia. Also, I'm jointly leading the CIB task group on net zero carbon. So I'm here trying to share some of my experiences related to my own university and as well as the work we have done on the particular task group, and to cover the topic on the role of net zero carbon education in achieving UN sustainability goals. So first, before I start, let me thank Mark and his team for giving this opportunity to participate in this very timely discussion. So in terms of the role of built environment on carbon reduction, we all are aware that our industry is a key contributor to global carbon emissions. And I think this talk was the series of panel discussions. I see a nice sequence starting with Hal, setting the importance of sustainability and the need for multiple perspectives. And then Professor Fedley is going into sustainable development goals and the need for workforce enforcement, and me particularly discussing on the net zero carbon aspects and its education. So I think when it comes to built environment, we all have a key role to play and in global carbon reductions. So there is a role for everyone involved, all parties on carbon reduction. So I'm just picking this from Passer et al. Study, where they pick 5 points from the 13 points of GRAS declaration that was set in the SB 19 conference, and where it highlighted the roles for each party in playing a role for carbon reduction in the built environment. So to start with the global commitments to reduce carbon, starting with the Paris Agreement in 2015, and also the setting of the 17 UN SDGs, which Fedley touched on in detail. So there is a need to realize these targets through standards and legislations at country and regional levels. So there's a role for policymakers, governments, and the relevant entities to play on creating policies and action plans and guidelines to start with. And we know like some countries are ahead in terms of this, and we have actually the TG 124 coordinators along with some of the members have published a paper related to this on mapping the policies and guidelines on how some countries have been leading in this area and have created this type of standards and legislation. So coming on to the second category, like all construction industry participants should consider net zero concepts in their practices. Now, for example, it has to start with project owners, clients, and the developers, and they have they need to be aware of the potential and financial benefits of going for net zero carbon buildings. And this has to also be realized through architects and engineers, considering design tools and optimization methods for net zero carbon buildings. And then we have contractors and suppliers who need to be equipped with skills and expertise to construct this sort of buildings. And they also need to be aware of the suitable materials and technologies. And finally, the users and occupants are also need to be skilled to operate and manage net zero carbon buildings efficiently. So while the industry keep people having these different needs to be educated and be skilled with net zero carbon practices, there are 3 other parties that have a key role in this space. So starting with researchers such as university academics and research councils and several other parties. We all need to prioritize and advance research on net zero carbon tools and technologies. And then universities and other key institutions also have this important role to educate the future workforce. And when it comes to the existing workforce, which Federley's also touched on, there is need for training and upskilling, and this can be done by professional bodies and other training institutions. So it all comes down to say that all parties need to focus on carbon-related education. So coming on to our CIB task group, TG124, which is focused on net zero carbon building design and construction practices. We just initiated this task group in 2022, and we have been very active since then. And the aim of the task group was to actually increase awareness and educate all key stakeholders. And we have done it through several initiatives such as industry forums, panel discussions, conference sessions, and also we've done some special issues in some Q1 journals and also joint publications. So today I will share 2 main activities and initiatives that as it connects with the theme on this role of net education in SDGs. So that's about our global survey and the forthcoming book. So we actually in 2024 received SABI Vista funding about to conduct this global survey to explore net zero carbon practices in several countries. So we actually looked into 7 countries, including Australia, New Zealand, Sri Lanka, Hong Kong, and UK, and South Africa, Italy. So all 7 countries, we conducted the same survey among the industry practitioners. And we looked at the survey is nearing its completion, and we are planning to produce a final report with its findings at the forthcoming World Building Congress in this May at Purdue. So talking about this online survey a bit more, we looked at the industry practitioners' experience with various net zero carbon building practices, so how they use low carbon materials and carbon estimating tools, carbon trading practices, and also onto the energy aspects like energy efficient systems, use of renewable energy storage systems, and passive design practices. So we've particularly looked at items that we've explored through research studies, through literature review, and how they are aware of these practices, or whether they have been actually implementing them in the industry. So this is a snapshot of the Australian survey results. And as we can see from some of those results, actually, we see that majority of those carbon tools and technologies are not well practice. There's more potential to be introduced to the industry. So the key emerging finding is the need for awareness, more awareness on carbon reduction tools among these various parties. And we can see that researchers have really gone into many solutions aspects when it comes to looking into literature review, but it's not been absorbed by the industry to the same extent. So that was an emerging issue from that survey. So the other one that I wanted to highlight is that the forthcoming Springer book that is edited by the TG124 coordinator. So here we complied this fragmented research knowledge on net zero carbon buildings into a comprehensive guide, and it covers various carbon reduction tools and which can be applied in different life cycle stages, starting with design, construction, with its supply chain, and towards maintenance and end of life cycle stages. So we see this book will take a next step in educating all parties on construction reduction practices, and in particular the students following the AEC programs. So also I want to turn to my own university, Western Sydney University, as an example of pioneering sustainable education in achieving SDGs. So I'm really proud to highlight that Western Sydney University is placed #1 in the world for achieving SDGs for 3 consecutive years, starting with 2022 in Times Education Impact Ranking. So what Western Sydney does is address this sustainability education through 4 key areas: curriculum, university operations, research, and engagement. So as an example, I would like to highlight like the curriculum is all shaped by an additional attribute that was introduced on sustainability. I think Felice also touched on that. So it's nice to hear that there are this sort of practices being undertaken by the universities too. But with that graduate attribute that we all are in each of our programs, we all are supposed to reflect and match that attribute through subject learning outcomes and assessments in each of our programs. So that is one of the examples I just thought would like to share. And also in my last slide, I wanted to bring in some actual case studies on how we embed sustainability through innovative ways in our own construction management program. So I think I may not be able to touch in detail onto this, but maybe in the Q&A, I may have time to take you through a bit on the 2 examples that I put in this slide. So let me finish my talk by this quote. So we all have a big responsibility as academics in preparing our future force for overall sustainability education, and in particular on net zero carbon concepts, and embed them in curricula to achieve US sustainability goals. So the curriculums need rethinking and incorporation of innovative problem-based thinking. So with that, I will stop my talk. Yes, thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Professor Senaratne. That was really interesting. And thanks for bringing out the importance of net zero carbon practices, particularly as we train our students and as we prepare the next generation of construction professionals. So with that said, last but certainly not the least, we have Attorney Jason Boffey to share some of the legal perspective that needs to be thought about as well in terms of not only education, but also implementation of sustainable practices. Jason, over to you, please, for the next 8 minutes.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. First off, my role is as an attorney. I am not in academics. So I bring a perspective of what a legal education can bring towards advancing SDGs. So I thought it was an important discussion to talk about how that legal education translates into the important work that each of you are doing on a daily basis. And I think I would start off by saying that a legal education isn't necessarily like an education in most fields. You typically aren't learning the nuts and bolts of your field. You're really trying to think how a lawyer thinks, how the law is meant to be applied, and how that is carried forward into contracts. So it's a different type of education than we might normally see with the other panelists. One of the important things that I think about when I think about legal education and how it translates into promoting sustainable practices is I think about it in two large ways. The first being the macro view, how laws are developed, how laws are implemented, how laws can either promote sustainable activities or be a detriment to them. And then I think about it on the micro level, right? How do you take that information on the macro level, everything that we learn, everything that we develop, and how do we then carry that forward into the contracts and documents that are necessary to implement whatever our goals happen to be? So stepping back and thinking about it on the macro level, a legal education gives you the opportunity to participate in the process, to help legislators and policymakers actually put together the documents that are necessary to put forward the goals that are being sought to be put forward. So as an example, the Inflation Reduction Act here in the United States, it was actually the largest clean energy incentive in US history. It is a 700-page long piece of legislation. That's all written by lawyers, right? So the lawyers may not necessarily participate in a direct role in furthering sustainability, but here they are in the background preparing the documents that are necessary to help the government push their agendas forward and their goals forward through this actual legislation. The other side of that is not only are the lawyers putting forth the language that is necessary in the legislation, then there are the lawyers like myself whose job it is to then take that information that is put forward into legislation and then decipher what that means. So one of the ways that legislation helps further sustainability is often they will offer incentives. That is a big thing here in the US. That is a large part of my practice is helping developers build power plants. A significant portion of that is renewable energy. And a lot of that is driven by the tax incentives that are included in certain legislative enactments here in the US. So lawyers have that opportunity to take the information from the legislation and decide how that can apply to their client. What is the best way that they can use that to further their own sustainability goals? The other part of that is understanding what you have to do or what you're not allowed to do. So for example, this particular graphic show where lead requirements are actually enacted as part of laws in different states in the US. It is not mandatory throughout. It varies jurisdiction by jurisdiction. And as you go and consider building a project, you need to know whether in fact you have to follow it, or maybe there's some prohibitions that would undermine your sustainability goals. And just as importantly as what's in the law is what's not in the law, right? And lawyers have the opportunity and the ability to help understand and interpret the laws to understand, well, there's no prohibition against maybe urban agriculture, right? Maybe we can have a front yard garden. Maybe we can have solar panels on our house. Or maybe there's a local ordinance that somehow prevents that. And we have to understand what that means and how that impacts our sustainable goals. And then when I think about the macro view, we then have to take it down into the micro view, which I suggest is the actual contracts, the documents that are going to implement our goals as we move forward. And when we talk about the things that we can and can't do, it's pretty easy when there are things that we're not allowed to do by law, right? We can carry that forward into any contract or agreement and specifically state you shall not do whatever is prohibited. That's pretty standard, and that's what everybody would expect. You can't, by contract around what the law prohibits. But then the question becomes, and this becomes very important, especially in the built environment and how we are trying to implement our goals, is what happens when a contractor or a person on the project fails to do what they're not allowed to do. Sometimes there's significant consequences from that, and you have to decide within your contract who's going to be responsible for those consequences. Many times contractors are unwilling to take on the entirety of the burden of the failure to comply with whatever the law happens to be. It puts an owner or developer that is developing the project in a very difficult position. But in order to even move forward with the project in the first place, the owner sometimes have to accept that risk, knowing that there may be a circumstance or an instance where the contractor fails to comply with the local laws. The other side to think about is how those incentives that are carried forward in legislation get carried down into the contracts, right? Is there going to be maybe a sharing of the incentives? Or will the incentives specifically and only be for the benefit of the developer or owner of the project? Sometimes you can have a sharing of maybe cost savings or tax benefits, or maybe grants that would come directly to the contractor or the project. That is one way to handle it. The other way to handle it is to have a negative consequence. So, for example, if the contractor fails to comply with every aspect of the law that was intended to provide incentives to a project owner or developer, there could be the negative consequences. But here again, there is a situation where most contractors are unwilling to take on that risk. A lot of times we see in our particular projects and contracts that our developers are counting on, in most cases, billions of dollars of tax incentives to come that help promote the sustainable goals of the renewable energy projects. If the contractor fails to comply with all the legislation that is going to provide those tax incentives, for example, if they fail to comply with the minimum domestic content requirement, which here in the US means you have to buy a certain amount of your goods and equipment directly from US manufacturers. And if you fail to do that, the developer or owner loses out on those tax incentives. Who is then going to be responsible for that loss of tax incentives? And that loss of tax incentive may undermine the entire business case for the project. But most instances, a contractor is going to be unwilling to take on those billions of dollars of risk. So it puts the particular project at risk, but there's still the upside for the owner that the requirements may be met, and then the incentives will be received. So it's very complicated in ways to work things, and it's important for lawyers who understand the laws, to understand the contracts, to work through those issues and work for a solution towards both parties and to advance the sustainable goals. So that was just a brief insight into how the legal education can help advance the SDGs.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate that. And that was really important for everybody to understand, what are some of the legal implications, or what policies and laws need to be in place to move towards sustainable development. So thank you all, four of you, for excellent presentations. Let me open the floor for question and answers. I'm sure there are a lot of questions coming up. Let me see. Zahir, you had a question. Please open your mic and ask. Is Zahir still here with us? I saw him earlier. Well, while he's trying to figure it out, his mic works or not, let me ask one of my questions. And, starting with Hal, you really set the stage up nicely for this discussion. And you mentioned about, it's a complex set of problem indeed. It's not a binary, a yes or a nay type of question. Particularly in the construction industry, when we are talking about, the multidisciplinarity of the industry and multiple stakeholders. So how broad, in your opinion, should the curriculum be to cover these complexities? And you also mentioned, systems thinking. So I'm thinking, what would be your thoughts and of course, other panelists on that perspective?
Thank you so much, Mark. That's a great question. Something that kind of comes to mind that resonated with me when Jason was talking about legal education is the idea of in that legal framework, they're teaching students how to think and how to think through sort of the structures of the law. And I think when it comes to sustainability, that metaphor makes a lot of sense. It's really about also how to think, how to understand the implications of the system, right? If you're thinking about a construction project, I remember when we were in the Rinker School, we were learning, scheduling and estimating, and we were understanding some strengths and statics, and we were understanding how to manage the job, how to deal with, conflict and contention and all of these things. And at the end of the day, like some of the things that we learned, we didn't, we learned software for the estimating and the scheduling. And my first job out of college, the company didn't use either of those software packages. So what I really needed to know was the principles that underlie, critical path dependencies, the kinds of things that come into, the schedule of a job, and that you would set back the entire project if something didn't come in that was in a critical path dependency. And so I think that's the key is understanding that we have enough perspectives in there for the kinds of decisions that are being made in the architectural planning stages, in the construction engineering stages, in the operations and management stages, so that they can minimize the risk and minimize the chance that they will overlook or sort of be blind to something that would have been really critical in that decision. So with our students, we want them to understand some basic, building physics, building science. We want them to understand a little bit of environmental science, certainly some of the, organizational leadership and things of that nature. So at the end of the day, there's no limit to the number of things they probably need to know, but if we can get, the most critical sort of disciplines and skill sets, that helps. I'll kind of pass the baton to others.
Anybody else would like to jump in? And indeed, it is a lifelong learning process. So you're absolutely right. Fidelis, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want to build upon what Al have said. I think one thing that we try to do, I think we are doing it, is to let most of our students know that when it comes to construction management itself, not just sustainable construction, oftentimes we deal with wicked problems as opposed to team problems. Team problems are things that we have the solution, we have the formula. We just plug in, okay, this has happened, this a critical path issue, you address the float this way, then you have a solution. But in real life on site, and I think based on my own personal experience working in 2 countries on site, you deal with problems that you require multiple stakeholders to solve it. So you must be able to see things in different lanes, in different disciplines. So there's no single pathway to solution. So we expose our students to critical thinking and, of course, problem-solving attribute. And we try to do that with what we do in classes, project-based learning as well, and other things, and also problem-based learning. With that, we do that a lot in my university. So that we prepare them, just as Al has alluded to. Some of the things that we teach them, maybe software, when they go out there, the employer will not be using that particular software. But if that first principle is there and they know how to think, they will be able to move forward and solve the problem. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Fidelis. I think, Jake, you have a question. Can you open your mic and ask, or I can read it for you if you like. You're on mute.
I think
Jake,
he's
you're on
having
mute.
trouble with his mic.
Oh, is it? Okay. Well, let me read his question then. He says that how will the sustainability training differ across the panelists' respective regions based on political and cultural differences?
Maybe I'll go first to talk about the Australian context. Yeah, I think it's interesting, like even in the survey that I mentioned that we did, the global survey, we tried to look at the country-specific barriers and enablers. And it doesn't seem to be like different between the countries. Construction industry always has this the industry, particularly organizations, the builders have this short-term focus and focus on financial cost-related aspects, and therefore there's always the sustainability impacts are always overlooked. So we found this even in the survey findings, and talking about the we have, I think there was discussions around digital twins and other technologies that can be used in the construction processes, which can also contribute to sustainability. But then we see in the industry the slow adoption of the digital technologies, and there's still much to do in this space and there's that sort of barriers. I think it's more industry specific than country or regional specific. And whether it's developed or developing, we see similar things. But that coming onto Australian context, I think there are some key actors like GBCA, Green Building Council Australia, and then Circular Australia, and bodies like this who are very active and providing workshops, seminars, discussions to regularly update the current existing practitioners on this importance of sustainability and incorporating this into their practices. So on the other side, the professional bodies like Australian Institute of Builders and AIQS, Engineers Australia, they also have these CDP events on educating on these things. So there is a big awareness in this area, especially now, end of last year, 2024, there was this framework introduced, Australian Circular Economy Framework, with the target to double the circularity rate by 2035. And that also has given some awareness for the practitioners to really focus on sustainability outcomes. And also there is this mandate to disclose the sustainability impacts through ESG reporting. So I think the industry is through these legislative and frameworks, the industry is really kind of motivated and influenced to seriously consider sustainability and net zero carbon as well. So Australia research priorities on their research side, also the #1 priority is on transitioning to net zero future. So that's a bit of the Australian background and sustainability training aspects.
Thank you, Sapani. Anybody else wants to share the thoughts?
I just give one.
Go ahead, Jason.
Sorry, Hal. So in the US, we are what's called a common law system, which is based upon the English system, where we have a body of law that is determined by prior precedents in interpretation of the law. That is very much different in other parts of the world where they have a civil law system, where all laws are prescribed by the legislature, and then there is no interpretation involved from the court system. So my view, my perspective is obviously from the common law perspective of the US. That would certainly be something that looks very different in a civil law jurisdiction.
Indeed, yeah. Hal, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to chime in. I like this question, Jake, and I think it's kind of important to remember. The SDGs maybe give us a good metaphor for this, right? It's this idea of think global, act local. So the SDGs are these aspirational goals that are probably pretty common. They're kind of culture general or need general around the world. Everybody, wherever we are in the around the planet, need these 17 things. But what it looks like at the local level to be able to provision and provide those to the community is going to look quite different. And I can think of an example here, like this building behind me in my little background is a building on campus, and we're here in North Florida. It's a hot, humid climate. And early when this campus was being built, we were following the Ivy League, campuses and their architecture, and we did this collegiate Gothic with this very heavy thermal mass construction, and it doesn't actually make a lot of sense in this hot, humid climate. And so when the Rinker School of Construction Management built its new building, Rinker Hall, shortly after Jason and I graduated, it was very like culturally challenging for the planning staff here, because it was very different. It doesn't fit that collegiate Gothic, and it actually is less thermal mass, and it deals with the hot, humid climate, I think, in more strategically adaptive, green inspired, sustainable ways. And then they kind of gave a nod to it by having some columns that had brick, so that it would kind of give a little bit of that voice to the old like look, the historic part of campus, but not degrade the building performance, because it was it was supposed to be at the time among the best performing buildings on campus. So I think it's that think global, act local kind of context.
Thank you, Jake, for that question. Any other questions from the audience?
I think there was one in the chat, Mark.
Yeah, Dave, you had a question. Go ahead, please. Dave, you're still on mute. Okay, while Dave is getting his question out, let me throw in my question here. So, Jason, building upon what you said earlier and during your presentation as well, I was wondering, in your opinion, how can construction industry push for, policies, like you said, what is and what is not existing in the law at the present. And the second part of that would be that, how do our contracts need to be modified to actually facilitate risk sharing, so that contractors are more, willing to undertake risk and implement the SDGs or sustainability in their projects?
Sure, thanks for the question. So we have in the US a significant number of industry groups that are great at promoting sustainability goals. That is probably going to be our best opportunity for promoting those sustainability goals, getting those goals into legislation, and enacting them on a local level. That is certainly probably where we're going to have the most impact. What we can do to take those into contracts and the risk sharing that's involved with that, again, that's going to be at a very local level. It is, at least in my practice, very significant risk that a contractor and or a developer is facing. It's literally in the billions of dollars often. So that is a very significant risk. The upside has to be there. That's really what it comes down to, right? Both for the contractor and for the developer. And to find a way to partner together so that they ensure that the minimum right criteria necessary for them to achieve the incentives can actually be achieved, and put policies and procedures into place so that not only are they going to be achieved, they're going to be exceeded, so that there's going to be no question that this risk is even on the table. That is the primary way that we can potentially avoid that. If we fail to do those things, then we have to look very hard at what party is going to take that risk and responsibility, and what we could potentially do to mitigate that risk if those circumstances were to arise. That is certainly the harder question, but because there is that incentives, those opportunities, and a lot of the opportunities are not a zero-sum game, there are still important points in which each party can achieve what is necessary to achieve the overall incentives.
Thank you, Jason. Let me build upon that just a little bit. So, I mean, should the construction industry, and particularly I'm referring to contractors here, should they wait for the owners to take the initiative, or can they do something that would actually trigger the thought process for owners in implementing SDGs on their projects, or thinking about sustainability on their projects?
So in my experience, and I know people like Cal and yourself around the world are doing what you can to promote it, But contractors are in a great position. They see multiple projects, whereas owners and developers maybe are very siloed in what they are trying to accomplish, and they don't understand how the sustainability goals can translate to real dollars to them. So for contractors to come into a meeting, an early meeting, development meeting with an owner or developer, and let them know what they've seen on other projects, right? How it can be a benefit to them on a particular project that they're considering. That there's going to be an excellent opportunity for contractors to move the sustainability goals forward that way.
Anybody else wants to jump in on that?
If I may jump in there, I think from our context or experience, not just contractors, thank you very much, Jason, the designers as well, the architects, they are the advisors of the client and the developers. If they, oftentimes they are exposed to the benefit of green building, attribute in buildings, and all that. If they are able to advise the client and the developer correctly, because construction is a demand-driven enterprise, then the developer or client will be more attuned to building sustainably.
Thank you, Federalist. I see that Professor Jason Bedding is with us today. Jason, would you like to ask a question? I'm putting him on the spot here.
And Mark, Dave had asked us to read his question since he doesn't have a mic.
Oh, is it? Okay. Yeah. So David was asking about capability of math. I'm going to read his question. So it says math is used much in construction. Different levels of math are used in construction programs, calculus and differential equations with construction engineering programs, but construction management, not that same level of math. With technology advances, what would anyone comment about level and rigor of math needed for construction studies?
Maybe I can answer that based
Go ahead,
on
please.
my experience on teaching, quantity survey and related subjects, measurements and costing, especially, for construction management students, maths is like, the moment you say maths, it's like something they think, I think they get scared to hear the word math. So something I always say is there's nothing like, it's not complex maths that would be required when it comes to apply maths in construction management programs. So this, you just need to understand the basic. No, I think it's not to the level of engineering programs. So, but we actually try to build if they have gaps, we have found other sort of modules that they can refer to and get some initial foundation skills on that. So I think with the, when it comes to my particular teaching areas like measurement, costing, there is particular softwares. Now students are really good with softwares, and it's easy to teach them through software. So so I think I even changed my practice from the old ways of showing them each and every step of taking off from quantities, from bill of quantities to easy format to go with software. So I think students should not be like scared of the level of maths required, but it's something that they can relate with the actual buildings and existing practice and build on. So that's something I just thought I would share.
Thanks, Stephanie. Indeed, that is absolutely right. Jason, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I saw you joining us there. So
no, you definitely called me out. I had my black screen. I was listening to the panelists. I appreciate you all. And I think like being here at UF with Hal, and we have a very interdisciplinary college environment. So like a lot of our classes are, you have students coming from different traditions and with different values and things that they already know. So it's kind of I think it's a great environment to teach about sustainability. sometimes we get classes where we just have one discipline, and that can be tough, you know, because being in construction management myself, where most of my work is more related to, you know, society, people. A lot of the students I might have in my classroom are like business sometimes. And so I just wondered if the panelists have ideas about just as educators, taking different approaches depending on who's in the room and getting to know like where your students are coming from, what their ambitions are, where they're going with their lives, what they care about. How does that play into the way that you teach about sustainability? Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Thank you.
Anybody wants to take that on?
I'll give a quick sort of kickoff answer, and I love this question, Jason, and it's such a privilege to get to work with really great thinkers like Jason. With students, sometimes we get students in my classes that are more interested, you know, in construction, as Jason was saying, and then others are maybe more interested in planning or maybe working for an NGO and doing something more environmental related. And I try to always think of the angle they take in, right? So I might have students that I grew up hunting and fishing in Central Florida, and so I might have students that are really interested in hunting and fishing, and they think about the landscape through that lens, and they care about the landscape in that lens. And then maybe I'll talk about how organizations like Ducks Unlimited actually collaborate with environmental NGOs in habitat preservation and trying to balance, you know, urban land use change and things around there by finding the synergies, because people that might live in these communities that are being built nearby might want to be able to use these natural areas and have proximity to them. So I think trying to find, like Jason said, you know, meet each of these students where they are, where their values, where their interests are, and then try to find that common ground, I think can really open each of them up to start to hear each other's perspective, and then they again have that multitude of perspectives, so have a more complete picture of the complexity of that question or that situation.
Thank you, Hal. Anybody else?
I may add a little bit. I think our students, our student group, they might end up with builders or the consultants, and you know, the program is structured in such a way that they can end up being project managers or estimators, or there's different majors. So in terms of like majority actually are getting cadetships and industry jobs by the second year, and majority of the students. So it's very hard to get them actually getting into their subjects and putting there enough time. But when you try to relate with the industry experience, I see that it really works. For example, now we have these honors projects in the final year. So students, when I have been giving like sustainability related topics for them to research on, and they're really like willing to do that by applying into the industry workplace and seeing the sustainability challenges in the workplace or in a particular project, and applying that through research, scientific inquiry. So I'd say that's the way, like, connected with the workplace and the actual industry problems. That way it's very easy to teach sustainability to students, the particular cohort that I'm dealing with. Yes.
Thank you, Sipani. There are plenty of more questions that have come my way, but in the interest of time, we will have to wrap it up. We just have about 2 minutes left. So let me ask, in conclusion, my final question, and 30 seconds to each panelist. You know, starting with Fidelis, you mentioned in your talk that about employee empowerment, and the thought that was coming to my mind was that, you know, who should be taking the lead in thinking sustainable construction, whether it should be the workers, employees, or the contractor in that sense. So it's a broader question, but I'd like each one of you to give me a 30-second thoughts, please.
My answer to that would be the employers at the company level must take the lead, must expose the student, the employees to all aspects of sustainability pertaining to the work they do. So if it's a contractor, then it must take the lead.
Thank you, Fidelis. Jason?
I'll have to take it a little differently because I look at contractor versus owner because that is how my practice is. But it's a similar scenario in that I think the owner has to take the lead, right? Because they are the ones that's going to drive the process. They're going to drive the requirements from the contractors that are going to participate. So really, those are the parties that are going to have to take the lead.
Thank you, Jason. Sepani?
Yeah, I also think owners have to actually at least take the lead or just initiate it, but that has to come, I think, like Fredley said, by some educating by the designers or the project managers, the consultants, whoever is advising to the owners. So yeah, I think that should be the way forward.
Thank you, Sepani. Hal, final word?
Sure. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I like many things, I tend to think of it through sort of a both and kind of context where I do think that it needs to come from the top down in the sense of sort of society, rights, rules, regulations, roles that we take on. But then it's those of us down sort of in the field, you know, the laborers, the management at the subs level, at the GC level that are actually implementing and activating these broader policies. And they could be like a bottleneck and point of failure in actually achieving more sustainable outcomes. So I think it's this mix, right? And it's constantly evolving where sometimes the innovators at the bottom are doing things that the regulations aren't there yet. And then they'll start to change the regulations, realizing there's this innovation happening. And then sometimes the regulations are outpacing, the ability to do those things down in the field. So I think it's this constant sort of ebb and flow between the bottom up and top down.
Great. Thank you all very much. For sharing your thoughts, participating in the panel. Sepani, especially to you. It's middle of the night, and I really appreciate that you're still, sharing your thoughts and bright as ever. So I really appreciate all of you taking time. And Jason, thanks for joining in from Florida. So I appreciate that as well. To the audience, please open your mic and let's give them a big round of applause. And either electronic or open your mic, whichever way works. But again, thanks to all of you, and thanks to our audience for sticking around and listening to all these thoughts from our distinguished panelists. And stay tuned for next week. We'll come up with another panel like this and share some more ideas about how the built environment can push the Sustainable Development Goals. With that said, thank you all. See you all next week. Bye.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Mike.
Sam.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, Mark.
everyone.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.